The first time Ava Reynolds asked her father if she was going to die, he forgot how to breathe. The question came quietly. Not during one of her painful therapy sessions. Not after another disappointing appointment with specialists who spoke in careful voices and avoided eye contact. Not even on the nights when she cried from the nerve pain shooting through her legs that no longer moved. It came on an ordinary Tuesday evening while rain tapped softly against the enormous windows of their penthouse overlooking Manhattan. "Daddy," she whispered from her wheelchair, her small fingers clutching the edge of a blanket. "If my legs never work again, will everybody eventually stop loving me?" Ethan Reynolds stood frozen near the kitchen counter, still wearing the $1,000 suit he hadn't had time to change out of after work. CEO of one of the biggest tech companies in America. Forbes covers. Private jets. Boardrooms filled with people terrified of disappointing him. And yet none of it mattered. Because his 10-year-old daughter was looking at him with eyes so heartbreakingly fragile that he felt completely powerless. "No," he said instantly, kneeling in front of her. "Never. Ava, listen to me carefully. There is absolutely nothing that could make me stop loving you." But Mom left. The words shattered the room. Ethan lowered his head for a second. 6 months earlier, the accident had changed everything. A drunk driver. One rainy highway. One crushed SUV. Ava survived. Barely. But the damage to her spine had left her paralyzed from the waist down. And her mother unable to handle the endless hospitals, medications, emotional exhaustion, and destruction of the perfect life she once loved eventually packed her bags and disappeared into another country with a man she'd met during one of Ethan's business trips. Since then, Ava had stopped smiling, stopped laughing, stopped believing life could ever be beautiful again. Ethan spent millions trying to fix what money suddenly couldn't solve. The best surgeons in the country, experimental treatments overseas, private rehabilitation centers. Nothing changed. And slowly, painfully, hope began dying inside their home, until the day Ethan met Daniel Brooks. It happened in the least glamorous place imaginable, the hospital cafeteria. Ethan had gone down for coffee after another, crushing appointment with Ava's neurologist. The doctor had delivered the same careful speech he'd memorized by now. We shouldn't give up, but expectations should remain realistic. Realistic. Ethan hated that word. He stood near the coffee station, staring blankly into space, when a little girl's laughter suddenly echoed across the room. Not polite laughter. Not forced laughter. Real laughter. Bright, wild, alive. Ethan turned instinctively. At a nearby table sat a man in worn jeans and a faded gray hoodie helping a little girl decorate. Pancakes with whipped cream even, though it was nearly dinner time. The child giggled uncontrollably, while the man pretended the pancake was a masterpiece, worthy of a museum. Ethan found himself staring. The girl noticed him first. "Daddy," she whispered loudly, "that man looks sad." The father glanced up. For a second, Ethan expected awkwardness or recognition. Most people recognized him immediately. Instead, the man simply offered a small nod. "You okay?" he asked. Such a simple question. Yet nobody had asked Ethan that in months. Not sincerely. Not without wanting something from him. Ethan almost answered automatically. "I'm fine." But the words refused to come out. And for reasons he didn't fully understand, he sat down across from the stranger. The man introduced himself as Daniel Brooks, single father, construction worker, widower. His daughter, Lily, was 8 years old and recovering from leukemia treatments. "She's doing better now," Daniel said softly while brushing Lily's hair behind her ear. "Long road, though." There was something calm about him. Something steady. Ethan found himself talking more than he intended. About Ava. About the accident. About the fear in her eyes. About how every day she seemed to drift further away emotionally. Daniel listened quietly without interrupting. And when Ethan finally stopped talking, exhausted and ashamed by how close he was to falling apart in front of a stranger, Daniel said something unexpected. "She doesn't need a miracle first." Ethan frowned. "What?" "She needs hope first," Daniel replied gently. "Sometimes people heal better when they believe their life still matters." Ethan looked away. "You think I haven't tried?" "I think," Daniel said carefully, "you've tried to save her life. But maybe she also needs help remembering how to live it." Those words stayed with Ethan long after he left the cafeteria. 3 days later, he saw Daniel again. Ava had refused physical therapy for the 4th time that week. She sat silently near the pediatric rehab center, staring out a window while Ethan argued quietly with a therapist nearby. Then suddenly Ava spoke. "Who's that?" Ethan turned. Daniel was walking down the hallway carrying Lily piggyback style while she laughed dramatically about being too weak to survive homework. Ava watched them intensely. For the first time in weeks, there was curiosity in her expression. The next moment changed everything. Lily spotted Ava and waved enthusiastically. "Hi!" Ava hesitated before giving a tiny wave back. Daniel approached slowly. "You must be Ava," he said warmly. "Your dad says you're pretty brave." Ava shrugged. "I guess." Daniel crouched beside her wheelchair. "You know," he whispered conspiratorially, "my daughter once punched me in the face during chemo." Lily gasped theatrically. "It was an accident!" Daniel rubbed his jaw. "Pretty sure it was intentional." Ava laughed. Actually laughed. The sound hit Ethan so hard emotionally he nearly lost composure right there in the hallway, because he hadn't heard that sound in months. After that, Daniel and Lily kept showing up, sometimes with card games, sometimes with terrible jokes, sometimes just to sit with Ava during therapy. Daniel never treated her like she was broken. He challenged her, teased her, encouraged her. When Ava grew frustrated during physical therapy and snapped, "What's the point? I'll never walk again anyway," everyone in the room fell silent. But Daniel simply walked over, crouched beside her, and whispered words that would later change all their lives. "I'll help her." Ethan blinked. "What?" Daniel looked directly at him. "I'll help her believe again." And somehow, he did. Little by little, Ava transformed. She started attending therapy willingly, then eagerly. She began painting again, smiling again, living again. And the most remarkable part? It had almost nothing to do with her legs. One snowy afternoon, Daniel brought Ava to a small community center gym where adaptive sports programs were held. At first, she resisted. "I can't do stuff like that." "Yes, you can," Daniel said simply. A coach handed Ava a lightweight sports wheelchair and encouraged her onto the basketball court. The first few minutes were awkward, then frustrating. Then suddenly, she scored. A tiny shot. Barely made it, but it went through the hoop. The entire gym erupted cheering. Ava stared in disbelief before bursting into tears. Not sad tears, hopeful tears. That night, Ethan found her awake past midnight. "What are you doing?" he asked softly. Ava looked up from her laptop. "Researching adaptive sports teams. Researching colleges with accessibility programs. Researching life. I think," she whispered carefully, "maybe my life isn't over after all." Ethan had to leave the room because he couldn't stop crying. Months passed. Then came the fundraiser. Ethan's company hosted a massive charity gala for pediatric rehabilitation programs. CEOs, celebrities, politicians, all gathered beneath glittering chandeliers. Ethan stood on stage preparing his speech while Ava waited nearby in her wheelchair wearing a deep blue dress and nervous smile. Then Ethan did something nobody expected. Instead of talking about donations or business achievements, he looked directly at Daniel sitting quietly near the back of the ballroom. And in front of hundreds of powerful people, Ethan's voice broke. "I spent most of my life believing success meant having power," he said. "Money, influence, control." The room fell silent. "But the man who saved my daughter had none of those things." Daniel looked stunned. Ethan continued. "When my daughter lost hope, I tried to buy solutions, surgeries, treatments, experts. But healing didn't begin until someone showed her kindness without expecting anything in return." Tears filled Ava's eyes. Ethan stepped off stage and walked through the crowd until he reached Daniel. Then, to the shock of everyone watching, one of the richest men in America pulled a construction worker into a fierce embrace. "You gave my daughter her life back," Ethan whispered. Daniel shook his head softly. "No," he replied. "She found her own strength. I just reminded her it was still there." Years later, Ava would still remember that moment. Not the accident. Not the pain. Not even the paralysis. She remembered the day someone looked at her broken heart instead of her broken body. Because sometimes the people who change Our lives aren't the wealthiest or most powerful. Sometimes they're just ordinary people carrying extraordinary kindness. And sometimes all it takes to save someone is a quiet promise, whispered at exactly the right moment. I'll help her.